Hello, everyone. Welcome to Drama Crime Podcast, Episode 1, featuring the story of Elizabeth Short and the horrifying murder case that remains unsolved to this day. Let me begin with a question that might make many of you shudder. Have you ever heard a scream in the quiet morning hours? A sound that wasn't human, but the voice of a terrifying truth revealing itself. Today, we're going back to 1947, the golden age of Hollywood, when hopes and dreams were shattered by the most brutal murder in American history. This case wasn't just about brutality, but was filled with mysteries that remain unanswered to this day. 77 years have passed, and the murder of a 22-year-old woman named Elizabeth Short, known to the world as the Black Dahlia, remains one of the most captivating unsolved cases. The reason isn't just the brutality of the murder, but because it struck at the dreams of countless people who flocked to Hollywood, and because the killer seemed to vanish into thin air, leaving no trace whatsoever. But that was only the beginning of the mystery, because the deeper you dig, the more you discover something dark and spine-chilling hidden behind this case than anyone ever imagined. Chapter 1. The Woman of Dreams and Disaster. The story begins with an ordinary Irish-American family in the Hyde Park neighborhood of Boston. Elizabeth Short was born on July 29, 1924, the third child in the family of 5 daughters total. In childhood, Elizabeth was a cheerful and charming child. She had beautiful long black hair and blue eyes that impressed many people. But that beautiful life began to crack when she was only 6 years old. 1929 was the year of the stock market crash crisis that changed the lives of countless Americans. Cleo Short, Elizabeth's father, was an entrepreneur who ran a small golf course construction business. When the economy collapsed, he lost all his capital. One day in 1930, Cleo drove away from home and never returned. Police found his car parked and abandoned beside the Charleston Bridge over the Charles River. At first, everyone thought he had committed suicide by jumping into the water. Elizabeth's mother had to raise all 5 children alone. The family moved to Florida to seek a better life. Elizabeth grew up in poverty and with a desire to escape from hardship. She became fascinated by the world of movies and Hollywood actors. She spent time watching movies in theaters and dreaming that someday she would appear on the silver screen. She learned about makeup and fashion from fashion magazines. What completely changed her life happened in December 1942, when Elizabeth was 18 years old. The family received a letter from someone they thought had been dead for 12 long years. Cleo Short was still alive. In that letter, he wrote that he was living in Vallejo, California, working as a car mechanic. He hadn't committed suicide, but chose to disappear because he felt ashamed and unable to support his family. For Elizabeth, learning that her father was still alive was both joy and anguish. She decided to travel to find her father in California in 1943, but their reunion didn't go as well as expected. Cleo had changed greatly. 13 years of guilt and sorrow had made him withdrawn and easily irritated. The father-daughter relationship was tense. Eventually, Elizabeth decided to move out of her father's house. She went to live in Long Beach and began building a new life on her own. Friends in Long Beach started calling her Black Dahlia because of her fondness for dressing in black outfits and black flowers she often pinned in her hair. This nickname was inspired by the 1946 movie, The Blue Dahlia. What her friends didn't know was that her choice to wear black didn't come from fashion, but from the sorrow hidden in her heart. Elizabeth had lost her boyfriend in World War II. Matt Gordon, a pilot she met and loved with while in Florida, was shot down in combat in India. Matt's death was a wound that never healed. She always kept his photographs and letters. She never had a serious relationship with anyone after that. In 1946, with the little savings she had, Elizabeth decided to try her luck one last time. She traveled to Los Angeles, the city of dreams and acting opportunities. What she didn't know was that this decision would lead her to the most brutal end anyone could imagine. Chapter 2. Life in the City of Dreams. Los Angeles in 1946 to 1947 was a city full of hope and pain. World War II had just ended. Veterans were returning home. People were seeking new dreams. Many people, especially young women from across America, flocked to Hollywood to become actresses. Elizabeth was one of those people. She rented a small room behind the Florentine Gardens nightclub on Hollywood Boulevard. The rent was cheap, but the environment wasn't very safe. She worked as a waitress in various restaurants and cafes. Her income was very low. Some days she had to eat only salad and bread. Friends said she was very thin in the final period of her life. In her free time, Elizabeth would go to auditions or walk along Hollywood Boulevard. She hoped that some film producer would notice her and give her a chance. But luck never came. What's notable is that even though Elizabeth was poor, she paid great attention to her appearance. She had several black outfits and always applied makeup carefully. She believed that looking good was an investment for the future. Her social life was quite complex. Elizabeth knew many men but rarely had deep relationships with anyone. Friends said she liked to pretend to be interested in men but never allowed anything serious to happen. This created dissatisfaction among many men who became involved with her. Later, police discovered that she knew at least 50 men and had been seen with at least 25 men in the 60 days before her death. One of the important men was Mark Hansen, a wealthy theater and nightclub owner. He was 40 years old, married with children, but had a reputation for liking young women. Elizabeth had attended parties at Hansen's house several times. She hoped he would help her get some acting role. But Hansen wanted something in return, something Elizabeth wouldn't give. The tension between the two increased steadily. People saw them arguing at the last party Elizabeth attended. Another suspicious person was Robert Manley, a married young man who was the last person to see Elizabeth alive. He drove her from San Diego and dropped her off at the Biltmore Hotel in downtown Los Angeles. January 9, 1947 was the last day anyone saw Elizabeth alive. She walked into the luxurious lobby of the Biltmore Hotel at approximately 6:30 p.m. After that, Elizabeth Short disappeared into the darkness of Los Angeles for 6 days. 6 days of mystery when no one knew where she was, what she was doing, or whom she met. 6 days that would transform her from a hopeful young woman into anyone's worst nightmare.
Chapter 3. The Day of Discovery and Horror. The morning of January 15, 1947 was a cold morning in Los Angeles. The sky was gray and dark, thick clouds covered the city. Betty Bersinger, a 42-year-old housewife, decided to take her 3-year-old daughter for a walk despite the poor weather. She thought a little exercise would be good for her child, so they walked in the Limert Park area, a suburban neighborhood in southwest Los Angeles. At approximately 10:30 a.m., Betty walked past a vacant lot on Norton Avenue, squeezed between 39th Street and Coliseum Street. At first, she saw something white about 10 meters away from the sidewalk. It was a strange shape that looked like a mannequin someone had dumped, or perhaps car parts. When she walked closer, what she saw made her scream so loudly that the little child cried along with her. It wasn't a mannequin, but the remains of a young woman that had been severely harmed. What Betty saw became an image that haunted her for life. The remains were arranged in a bizarre manner, as if someone was staging a scene. Both hands raised above the head, elbows bent at right angles, legs spread apart. The body showed signs of being separated into 2 parts. The separation was done with surgical precision. But the most disturbing thing wasn't the condition of the body, but the victim's face. There were severe cuts on both sides of the face, from the corners of the mouth to the ears, creating a disturbing appearance. The skin was pale white like paper. There wasn't any blood around where the body was found. This confirmed that the incident occurred elsewhere and the body was moved and left here. Betty ran to find the nearest police. Within minutes, several police cars, along with coroner staff, arrived at the scene. What the officers found when they examined the area made even experienced police officers deeply troubled. Marks on the neck, wrists, and ankles showed that the victim had been restrained and likely harmed before passing away. The body showed evidence of extensive damage, with internal examination revealing significant harm. Various parts showed signs of deliberate modification. The most disturbing aspect was evidence suggesting the perpetrator had spent considerable time with the victim after death. But there was another detail that made police certain this wasn't a crime of passion or accident. The remains had been thoroughly cleaned. There was no dirt whatsoever, no blood, no trace of foreign matter. The body was clean as if it had been carefully washed. Even the fingernails and toenails had been cleaned. The perpetrator spent a considerable amount of time preparing the scene. They had access to a place with complete water, electricity, and drainage systems, and importantly, some level of medical knowledge. The way the body was separated was done without affecting the spine at all. The separation point was exactly at a location where the body could be divided without having to cut bone. The coroner who came to examine said that such precision required knowledge of anatomy. This level of skill wasn't the work of an ordinary person. Moreover, the area where the body was found showed no signs of struggle. No blood, no fabric scraps, nothing at all. Only tire tracks and a cement bag with slight stains, which was presumed to have been used to transport the remains. High-ranking police officers who arrived at the scene all agreed that this wasn't the work of an ordinary person, but someone with experience, knowledge, and importantly, who likely had done this before. The horror increased when detectives found evidence of careful planning, from choosing the location at a vacant lot where people regularly passed by, arranging the scene in a specific way, to the unnatural cleanliness. The perpetrator wanted someone to find this scene and wanted it to create maximum shock.
Chapter 4: Identification and the beginning of the nightmare. Within hours of discovering the body, several law enforcement agencies became involved. Los Angeles Police, FBI, and even the Department of Defense. The first problem was identifying the victim. There were no documents anywhere near where the body was found. No purse, no clothes, no jewelry, nothing that would help with identification. The only thing left was fingerprints on the body that remained in perfect condition. But checking fingerprints in 1947 wasn't easy. Communication technology was still limited. The editor of the Los Angeles Examiner newspaper proposed a cutting-edge idea: use the sound photo machine, an early fax machine, to send the fingerprints to Washington, D.C. for FBI verification. What happened next shocked everyone. The FBI was able to identify the victim within 56 minutes. The victim was Elizabeth Short, a 22-year-old woman, but what was interesting was that her fingerprints appeared in the FBI database twice. First, in January 1943, when she applied for a job as a food server at Camp Cook military base in California. The second time in August 1943, when she was arrested for underage drinking in Santa Barbara. Police contacted Elizabeth's mother in Massachusetts, but the way the media obtained news made many people feel disgusted. A reporter from the Los Angeles Examiner called Phoebe Short, Elizabeth's mother, and lied, saying that her daughter had won a beauty contest and they needed additional information. Phoebe was very happy and told her daughter's story in detail, talking about her dreams, hopes, the men she knew, and plans for the future. When they had obtained complete information, the reporter then revealed the cruel truth that her daughter had been murdered. The pain of a mother having to learn of her daughter's death from the mass media became the beginning of unethical news coverage. Various newspapers began using the name Black Dahlia after learning her nickname from friends in Long Beach. The media began painting a distorted picture of Elizabeth, saying she was a woman who liked to seduce men, a woman who liked to tease, and even claiming she was a prostitute. The truth was, Elizabeth was an ordinary young woman with dreams. There was no evidence to support any of those accusations, but the media wanted interesting stories. Creating such an image not only destroyed Elizabeth's reputation after she had already died, but also affected the investigation because it made people see that she deserved what happened to her. The Los Angeles Examiner sold the most newspapers since the end of World War II. Black Dahlia news was on the front page for 31 consecutive days. But the most exciting thing happened on January 24, 1947. Several news agencies received mysterious envelopes. The sender's address was written with letters cut from newspapers. The message on the envelope said, "Here are Dahlia's belongings." Inside the envelope were Elizabeth's birth certificate, various business cards, photographs, various names written on paper, and an address book with Mark Hansen's name appearing on the cover. The envelope had been cleaned with benzene, just like Elizabeth's corpse. This made police believe that the sender was the real killer. Although they tried to clean it, some fingerprints remained on the envelope, but when sent to the FBI for examination, the fingerprints were damaged during transport and couldn't be used as evidence. Receiving Elizabeth's personal belongings back excited the police, but it was also the beginning of a terrifying cat-and-mouse game. The killer was playing with them. Chapter 5: Cat-and-Mouse Game and Letters from the Killer. After sending Elizabeth's personal belongings, the killer didn't stop there. In the following days, various news agencies began receiving letters from someone claiming to be the Black Dahlia killer. These letters had specific characteristics. They used letters cut from newspapers and magazines, pasted together to form messages, like ransom letters in movies. One of the letters sent to the Herald Express read, "I will stop killing Dahlia if I get 10 years punishment. Don't try to find me." Another sent to the Examiner read, "I changed my mind. You haven't been fair with me." There were 13 letters in total that police believed might have come from the real killer. Some used the cut-and-paste method, some were handwritten, and some were signed Black Dahlia Avenger. What was chilling was that the writer knew details of the murder that hadn't been released to the public, such as the position of the tattoo that was cut out and the fact that the victim's stomach was stuffed with feces. But when police tried to track the sender, they found it impossible. The letters were sent from various locations throughout the city, fingerprints were destroyed by cleaning, and no witnesses saw the sending. One of the most interesting letters was an appointment. The killer said he would surrender at a specified place and time. Police went to wait, but no one came. The next letter explained, "I changed my mind. You haven't been fair with me." This playing with the media and police showed that the killer was intelligent, knowledgeable, and most importantly, enjoyed the attention he received. Meanwhile, the Los Angeles police began intensive investigation. They established a special team led by Harry Hansen, an experienced detective. The first thing they did was investigate Elizabeth's life in detail. They found that she knew many men, had complex relationships with several people, and most importantly, had a missing week between January 9th and 15th. No one knew where Elizabeth went during that time, whom she met, what she did, or with whom she rode. The last 6 days of her life were a complete mystery. Police began interviewing every man who had ever known Elizabeth, from ex-boyfriends, co-workers, restaurant customers, to strangers who had seen her. The challenge was that Elizabeth was someone who liked to socialize. She knew many people, and many had reasons to want to harm her. Some men were angry that she pretended to be interested, but wouldn't allow anything serious. Some felt she was used by her for money and shelter. Some might have felt she knew secrets she shouldn't know. But the deeper they investigated, the more they found that this case was more complex than they thought. Elizabeth wasn't a random victim. She was specifically chosen. The killer knew her habits, knew where she would go, and most importantly, had the time and place to do what he did. This wasn't an accidental murder, but meticulous planning. Chapter 6: Suspects and False Confessions. During the 3 years of investigation, LAPD had more than 150 suspects. But what made the investigation even more complicated was false confessions. Since news of the murder spread, more than 60 people called or walked into police stations to confess to being the Black Dahlia killer. The first person to confess was a woman named Minnie Sepulveda. She called from a bar and said, "I just stabbed a young woman. I killed Elizabeth Short." But when police questioned her, they found she was a mentally ill person seeking attention. After that, people continued to confess. From people wanting fame, mentally ill people, people feeling guilty about other matters, to people who genuinely believed they had killed someone. Police had to spend considerable time and manpower checking these confessions, which slowed down the real investigation. Among the interesting suspects, several are still talked about today. Robert Manley was the last person to see Elizabeth alive. He drove her from San Diego to Los Angeles and dropped her off at the Biltmore Hotel. Initially, he was the #1 suspect, but when investigated, they found he had alibis for the crucial time period. Mark Hansen, the wealthy nightclub and theater owner. His name appeared in Elizabeth's address book. He knew her and had invited her to parties, but he denied involvement and had good lawyers. Leslie Dillon was the most interesting suspect in the early period. He contacted police claiming to know the killer, but became a suspect himself. Dillon had worked as a mortician's assistant and had knowledge about blood drainage and corpse handling. Interestingly, he knew details of the murder that hadn't been released to the public. When police questioned him, he claimed to be a crime fiction writer working on a book about the Black Dahlia case. But such a book never appeared. They also found that he had been in Los Angeles during the time of the incident and hurriedly moved to Florida afterward. Dr. Joseph Paul DeRiver, LAPD's psychologist, believed Dillon was a killer with split personality. He tricked Dillon into returning to California and arrested him without a warrant. But this method was illegal. Dillon was able to send a message asking for help. When the story hit the news, LAPD had to release him. Strangely, after this incident, Dillon mysteriously disappeared. No one knew where he went, and he was never interviewed again. Another suspicious person was Walter Bailey, a retired surgeon. He had known the Short family and lived near where the body was found. His medical knowledge matched the characteristics of the body cutting. But when police questioned him, they found he was severely ill with Alzheimer's disease and couldn't provide useful information. There was one chilling theory that the Black Dahlia murder was connected to the Cleveland torso murders that occurred in the 1930s. In that case, 13 people died, all precisely dismembered, similar to Elizabeth. The killer was never caught, and the case remains a mystery. Elliot Ness, head of the Untouchables team famous for catching Al Capone, was responsible for the Cleveland case, but he couldn't solve it either. Some researchers believe the same killer might have moved from Cleveland to Los Angeles and Elizabeth was his latest victim. But this is all theory. There's insufficient concrete evidence to prove it. Chapter 7. Dr. George H. Hodel, the most chilling theory. Among all theories about the Black Dahlia murder, there's one theory that's the most chilling and credible, the theory of Steve Hodel, former LAPD detective who firmly believes that his own father was the Black Dahlia killer. Dr. George H. Hodel, born in 1907, was a famous obstetrician-gynecologist. He graduated from the University of California and opened a clinic in downtown Los Angeles. Dr. Hodel wasn't an ordinary doctor. He was charming, intelligent, wealthy, and had a strange life. He threw parties for Hollywood celebrities at his luxurious Los Angeles home, had interests in surrealist art, and most importantly, had abnormal sexual behavior. Dr. Hodel's house at Soden House on Franklin Avenue was a house with strange architecture, designed by Lloyd Wright, son of Frank Wright. This house resembled an ancient Mayan temple, had a complex basement, and importantly, had multiple bathrooms with complete drainage systems. What made Dr. Hodel a suspect began in 1949 when he was arrested for sexually abusing Tamar Hodel, his own teenage daughter. During the trial, horrifying details about Dr. Hodel's life began to emerge. He organized parties with group sex, drug use, and abusive behavior toward his daughter. Although he escaped the child abuse charges, his name began to be linked to the Black Dahlia case. Police found that Dr. Hodel had the ability to dismember bodies. He had studied anatomy and surgery well. The bisection of Elizabeth's body without affecting bone was a technique called hemicorporectomy, which was taught in medical schools in the 1930s, exactly when Dr. Hodel was studying. What was chilling was that there were secret FBI recordings of Dr. Hodel talking with friends at his house. In those recordings, he could be heard talking about the perfect killing and suppose I killed her. They couldn't prove it. But the most interesting evidence came from the investigation of Steve Hodel, Dr. Hodel's son,
who was an LAPD detective. In 1999, Steve began suspecting his own father and started a private investigation. He found that he had heard the name Black Dahlia from his father since he was a child, but didn't understand the meaning until he grew up and learned it was a murder case. He went to search his father's documents at UCLA University and found a folder containing receipts for cement purchases. The date on the receipt was January 10, 1947, just 5 days before Elizabeth's body was discovered. The receipt specified the purchase of large cement bags, the same brand and size that police found near the corpse. Steve also found photographs in his father's old belongings, photographs of a black-haired young woman he believed was Elizabeth Short. These photographs were taken at Soden House. Additionally, he found evidence he believed linked his father to many other murders, including the Zodiac killer case that occurred in San Francisco later. Steve claimed he created a specific symbol, a cross-shaped carved on Elizabeth's hip. The same symbol appeared in other murders he believed his father committed. In 2004, Stephen R. Kay, Los Angeles District Attorney, studied Steve's evidence and said, "If Dr. George Hodel was still alive, we would have sufficient evidence to charge him with the murder of Elizabeth Short." But Dr. Hodel died in 1999 before he could be charged and before Steve began his investigation. The most chilling thing is that Steve claimed he remembered his father taking him to the vacant lot on Norton Avenue when he was still a child and saying, "This is where police found the black woman's body." At that time, Steve was still small and didn't understand the meaning, but when he grew up and learned about the Black Dahlia case, he was startled by that memory. Steve Hodel's theory has received a lot of attention. He has written several books about this, and there has been a TV series, I Am the Night, that tells this story. But there are some researchers who don't believe it. They point out that there's no concrete evidence that Dr. Hodel knew Elizabeth, and some evidence Steve presented might be mere coincidence. What everyone agrees on is that Dr. George Hodel was someone who had the capability, knowledge, and cruelty sufficient to commit such a murder. But the truth may never be revealed because everyone who knew the truth has passed away.
Chapter 8. The Black Dahlia murder wasn't just an unsolved murder case, but became a cultural phenomenon that deeply impacted American society. This was one of the first murder cases after World War II to capture the attention of the entire nation. It occurred in an era when mass media was becoming more powerful and became a prototype for sensational news coverage. This case changed how media reported crime news, using nicknames for cases, creating interesting stories around victims, and competing for news scoops, all began with this case. Elizabeth Short became a symbol of shattered dreams. She represented thousands of young women who came to Los Angeles hoping to become stars, but met cruel reality instead. But sadly, Elizabeth never got the opportunity she sought. She never got any roles in Hollywood, but her name became immortal in crime history. This case inspired countless works of art. James Ellroy wrote the novel The Black Dahlia in 1987, which became one of the greatest crime novels. The movie The Black Dahlia, directed by Brian De Palma, was released in 2006. There have been TV series, documentaries, and hundreds of books created. But what's worth considering is that the more Elizabeth's story is used in entertainment, the more her true identity disappears. She becomes merely a character in stories others create. The Black Dahlia case also affected police work. It showed the importance of preserving evidence, communicating with mass media, and managing public pressure. In the 77 years that have passed, new technologies have been used to investigate this case multiple times, from DNA analysis to computer-assisted analysis, but nothing has yielded clear results. The main problem is that most evidence has been lost or damaged, and everyone involved in the case has died. The FBI has officially announced that this case may never be solved due to too much time having passed. But public interest has never diminished. Every year there are still amateur detectives, researchers, and ordinary people trying to find answers. Today, at 39th Street and Norton Avenue, people still come to visit. Some place flowers, some just stand quietly and reflect on the life of the young woman who died so brutally. From that spot, on clear days, you can see the Hollywood sign, the place of dreams that Elizabeth longed to reach but never had the chance to, except on the last day of her life when she was found in horrifying condition. She was one of us. That's what Kim Cooper, a crime tour guide in Los Angeles, tells tourists every time she brings them to this spot. She almost had the chance to grow up, live, and be happy here. The least we can do is respect her and show a little love. During this time, we've traveled back to one of the most mysterious and chilling murder cases in history. Elizabeth Short, a 22-year-old woman who dreamed to being an actress, became a symbol of shattered dreams, severed hopes, and unanswered mysteries. 77 years have passed, and we still don't know who the Black Dahlia killer was, don't know why she had to die so brutally, and don't know what happened in the last 6 days of her life. Perhaps some truths weren't meant to be revealed. Perhaps some mysteries were created to remind us of the darkness hidden in human hearts. But one thing we should remember is that behind every murder case, behind every mystery, there's the life of a real person that was cut short, with dreams, hopes, and love destroyed forever. Elizabeth Short wasn't just the Black Dahlia in crime legend. She was someone's daughter, someone's sister, a human being who had life, laughter, tears, and dreams just like all of us. Our remembering her, talking about her, and seeking justice for her, even 77 years late, is one way to keep her alive in our hearts. In an era where forensic technology has advanced greatly, we might see the solving of various old mystery cases, but for the Black Dahlia case, the mystery might be the final legacy she left to the world. A legacy that reminds us that there's still evil we don't understand, still questions without answers, and still justice waiting. But the most important legacy is that we never stop seeking truth, never stop fighting for justice, and never forget those who were harmed. Today, when you walk past various places in the city, remember that behind every street, every building, every vacant lot, there might be hidden stories, lives that once passed through, and memories that still remain. And remember that in a world full of darkness, we all have a duty to be light for each other so that no one has to disappear into darkness like Elizabeth Short. And this is the story of the Black Dahlia, the horrifying murder case that remains unsolved. That's all the time we have today. If there are any errors in the information, I apologize here. Thank you everyone for following Drama Crime Podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe to encourage us. See you next time with other mystery cases still awaiting answers. That wraps up our episode today. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll see you again in the next one. Take care.